All right, welcome into another week of Dropping Dimes. I hope everybody out there is good and excited for today's trade deadline discussion. So I intend on just kind of meandering through all the names being floated out there and what teams are in discussion for what players. Um, kind of going back and forth, dancing around. I tried to cull all the information that I could from every available source that I could find, just in regards to who's legitimately out there, potentially going to be traded in discussions. Who's not, whose name is being floated, but has no real chance of being traded, so on and so forth. So, as per usual with the trade deadline, tons of teams are floating around ideas. I think everybody, by and large, needs some sort of depth. You can make a case that there's very few teams that are going to stand pat and need to stand pat. There are some that don't look like they're going to make any kind of move whatsoever. Like Phoenix doesn't look like it's going to do all that much. And someone like the Clippers really need to do something, but I'm not entirely sure what assets they have to trade out. If you go look at their future, draft picks, they don't own their number one until 2027. So they're kind of hamstrung as to what exactly, they can go out there and do. Also, if you're watching and you want to jump in, I'll bring people in for a couple minutes. Tell me who your team is and who they should be targeting and what you want to give up to get it, type of thing. But be brief, in and out, 5-6 minutes, something like that. Just post your email in the link and I'll copy and paste it and send you over. And then I'll bring you in and we'll get your 2 cents on it, because, you know as much as I do right now. I'm just sifting through all the various guys that follow, that are embedded with teams or nationally following. I'm trying to cull it and bring it all in one place for everybody. So the hottest name out there right now has to be Aaron Gordon. That's Aaron Gordon or Kyle Lowry, but we'll start with Gordon. So he's probably the biggest name that is asked for a trade. He's been there for 7 years and they've been mediocre to bad that entire 7 years. They've made the playoffs all of twice and they just get crushed each time in the playoffs. The biggest feather in their cap is the year Toronto won the championship. They took 1 game off Toronto in the opening round. That's it. So if Orlando makes the playoffs, they get routed. Otherwise, they're just in this quagmire of mediocrity. And Aaron Gordon is sick of it. And he wants out. And there are, tons of teams would love to have his service. It's whether or not anybody can actually put together a package that the Magic are willing to trade over Aaron Gordon for. Now, what I've found so far is the Celtics appear to be the front runner in any kind of trade. Now, they've offered, last I read, was 2 firsts in a package. But the newest sticking point I've seen is they want to get Evan Fournier back as well with Aaron Gordon. So they're going to have to sacrifice more than just the 2 firsts to get Gordon. Then they got to do salary matchups. Houston has been kicking the tires as well. They really want him. They've offered multiple picks, but right now, apparently the Celtics offer is a little bit sweeter. And, the Celtics need help at the 4 and at the 5. So Gordon be a good fit. The 2 firsts, it depends on how high those firsts are. There's also discussion that Marcus Smart is available in trade discussions, but Danny Ainge has said that he's basically only willing to accept a lottery pick for Marcus Smart. And I'm not sure how many teams are willing to sacrifice a lottery pick to get Marcus Smart. I think on the right team, he's definitely worth a lottery pick. And I'm a big Marcus Smart fan. He gives them an edge that when he's out, that team sorely lacks. They have no real sense of identity. They're way too passive without him. When it's, Tatum and Brown as the identity, both great players, but Marcus Smart is the dog that you need. Somebody that's out there and is just going to, push you and not give up and not going to take any shit from anybody. So would it be, if I'm the Magic, do I want Marcus Smart back as part of that package? Not really. He's not on the same timeline as my current guys, although he would give you, it'd be a nice compliment with Vucevic. Because as much as they could get more of a draft haul, more than likely, or asset haul for Vucevic, that's a tough one because he's 30 years old. And you need to find someone like the Lakers or the Nets who desperately need somebody like Vuce or Vooch. It's a Vucevic. I think it's Vucevic. But they don't have anything to offer at this point that would make it worthwhile for the Magic to get off of him. But Aaron Gordon has demanded a trade. So Aaron Gordon will be traded. It's a matter of what they can get returned for him at this point. But the Celtics leading the charge with 2 firsts. I can look up their future draft picks and see. Let's see. Celtics future draft picks. All right. So the Celtics coming up, what do they have? They've got this year's. Yeah, they've got draft picks for days. They've got this year's first and second plus OKC's second. They've got next year's first and second plus Charlotte's second. They've got their first and 23 and Dallas, Miami, or Houston, a huge explanation. One of their seconds. Their first and 24, 25. So they've got draft picks for days and they can sacrifice to get Aaron Gordon. And Houston's got it as well. I mean, and all the different, packages that they got, all the draft compensation that they've gotten for taking on salaries as of late, although they shipped out quite a bit in order to get Russ and get CP3 out of there. But I think the Celtics, depending on what kind of protections and or what years they're willing to do, I mean, if they do like their 21 first, it's not as advantageous as, say, if they're willing to do 25 or 26, because who knows how good they're going to be at that point. And they might have had to make a choice by then between Tatum and Brown and who they're going to, build around. Like, I know that the Celtics have, I've read rather, that the Celtics have contacted Atlanta about the potential of Collins rather, and Atlanta came back and was like, no problem, we want Jaylen Brown in return. And it's like, okay, this is not an apples and or this is not an apple for apple situation. In no world. As soon as I read that, I was like, Atlanta's out of its fucking mind. Apparently the Celtics returned fire with, oh, okay, you want Jaylen Brown? Then we want Trae Young. And basically at that point, Atlanta's hung up because asking for Jaylen Brown for Collins is just a non-starter, and you know it. I mean, I guess it doesn't hurt to ask, but no chance, none whatsoever that was going to happen. But Aaron Gordon will be moved. It looks like the Celtics are the number 1 team as of right now. The next would be Kyle Lowry. Now, Kyle Lowry has not said he wanted out, but there have been 2 teams consistently floated nonstop, and those are Miami and Philly. Now, depending on who you listen to, I've read more reports that Miami is his preferred of those, just because he's good friends with Jimmy Butler and would have a larger role on that team more than likely, just because what they're going to have to sacrifice to get him. Now, Miami reached out, and their initial offer was Dragic, Olynyk, and Kendrick Nunn for Kyle Lowry. Then Toronto returned, said not enough. Miami then offered Duncan Robinson, who's going to be a restricted free agent after this season. He's going to be a free agent regardless. He might be unrestricted. I don't know that there's a way in in which they can afford Duncan Robinson. But they threw him in, and Toronto came back and said, we want Hero. And I don't know. That's tough for Miami because the nice thing about Tyler Hero is he's cheap. He's on the second year of his rookie deal. And to sacrifice that, considering you've got Butler's salary and you've got Bam's salary, you'd be taking on Kyle Lowry's $30 million. It's nice to have cheap talent on the roster. Now, Hero's not having that good a season as of right now, especially after last year's playoff push, but it's second year and it's, it takes a while for guys to adjust. Very few come in and light the league on fire and progressively get better and better and better every year. There's usually ups and downs. Look at like Tatum and Brown on the Celtics. After that Eastern Conference Finals push, the next year, I and everybody else assumed Tatum especially is going to make a leap. And, it's taken him a little bit longer to grow into who he is now. And he still has room for growth. Both of them do. So I think at his price point, it'd be foolish to give up on Hero this quickly. So might want to stand pat, but that's where they're sitting at right now. Philly also in that mix. They're going to have to include Tyrese Maxey if Philly wants to get him. That would more than likely be the biggest piece that Toronto would want back. I would assume Maxey and probably Thibault. I think Thibault would be the bigger sticking point because Maxey, while young and looks like he could be, a starter in this league for a while, he'd be somewhat redundant when you add somebody like Kyle Lowry onto the team and you already have Ben Simmons. So you can sacrifice a guard a little bit, more easily than you can a 3-and-D wing in Maxey. But if that's what it takes and you really want Kyle Lowry and there's pressure from, say, Embiid and Simmons wanting to add somebody of their caliber, probably be a smart move if it's going to keep your stars happy and you think that this year is a legitimate push. And right now it could be. I mean, you need to deal with the Nets in the East. If you can get through them, the West, I'm not sure who's making it out right now. I mean, if you look at the Lakers, LeBron is out, AD is out, and Gasol's having back troubles, and he's going to be out. They're not going to rush him back. So suddenly they go from, I believe they're fourth in the standings to, depending on how long LeBron is out for and AD, they could slip down. They could end up being the 7th or 8th seed by the time they get all their guys back. It's entirely conceivable. They're only like a game or two up on the Spurs in 7th position as of right now. So, and what happens if the Lakers slip all the way down to a play-in game and they have a bad night and they don't make it in? Suddenly the West is wide open. You don't have the looming fear of the juggernaut of LeBron and AD. And if you're Philly, this could be your year. Just like, last year for the Celtics, I agree with the assessment that they had a really good shot last year. If they could have just gotten Hayward back and he was back to health and they were clicking on all the right cylinders, that was a championship team in the waiting. They just needed a little bit more time to get everybody healthy. But those windows sometimes are that finite. And with Philly, I mean, the Nets hypothetically are going to be stronger next year once they've had a full season to all play together, know where, they're already playing really well, but they haven't had Durant for a huge chunk of this season. And they're still number 2 in the East, nipping at the heels of Philly while Embiid sits out. So Philly's got to feel kind of, that fire light, a lighting underneath them saying we need to push our chips in. It's tough for them also because of everything they shipped out to get Harris. They don't have as much draft capital going forward as somebody like, say, the Celtics do, who have picks for days. and other teams. I mean, look at Oklahoma City. they could trade 5 firsts tomorrow, and it doesn't really make a dent in their cash. So it looks like Miami is the front runner, but at the same time, Lowry has made no demand. He is content, by his own words, to stay in Toronto and finish out his career in Toronto. I would assume at his age, he's 35, that he wants, another shot at a championship, and Toronto's nowhere near right now. They're in a tailspin. And it seems as though Masai is wisely saying we need to prepare for 2 years, 3 years from now. We're not in championship contention, because the other guy being floated around is Norman Powell. And I think Norman Powell is much more likely to be traded out. He's got 1 year after this, but it's a player option for, I believe, $11.8 million. And he is going to opt out of that because someone is going to pay him more than that. Since he's gotten the starter minutes, he's shooting in the low 40s from 3 at a nice volume, averaging somewhere around 20 points a game. He looks legit. And if you could trade for him and get his bird rights and, get him at a nice number, Powell will help a bunch of different teams. So I think Norman Powell is definitely out there on the trade block as of right now. I don't have anything written down as to any team in the front runner. As a front runner, I haven't seen any specific floated offers for Norman Powell. I could have missed it. But at the same time, I think there's a damn good chance that Norman Powell gets traded in the very near future. It only makes sense for Toronto just because they're not, their best case right now is they're 2 games back of the play-in game. They've lost somewhere along the lines of 8 straight games. I know that Siakam just got a huge fine for getting into a spat with Nick Nurse. Like, there is, a little disharmony in Toronto right now. It's understandable when you're losing that much and you've won a championship. You have certain expectations as players. But I think you need to figure out the identity of that team and the timeline of what your expectations should be. It's kind of like where the Kings are at right now. They have a bunch of talent and they have a bunch of suitors for that talent, because all appearances from the outside, by the look of it, is they have no intention of really trying to be relevant this year. As much as Kings fans may want Luke Walton fired, they're in a situation where the estimate is they've lost $100 million this year. So firing Luke Walton and paying the 2 extra years on his coaching contract doesn't really look feasible, considering they're in the hole for somewhere in the ballpark of $100 million to tack on another 10, 11 million to pay him to go away. Doesn't look like it's in the cards. So Luke Walton is staying. And they have interest for 3-4 guys on their squad. Richaun Holmes has been floated around as Harrison Barnes. A bunch of teams have interest in him. Bjelica is more than likely the first guy to be traded out the door for them. And I think they actually could get probably a nice little haul for Buddy Hield. You find the right team, just because I would give over those shots to Halliburton and make this team a De'Aaron Fox Halliburton duo and see what you got really right there. And I also read that they're more than content with staying with Bagley, but if somebody came in with a good offer, Bagley is up for trades as well. But right now, I'd assume Bjelica is the first out the door. Potentially Harrison Barnes, although I think there's a good chance that he stays because they like what he brings to the table, his veteran leadership, and he's played well enough for them. But it's entirely possible. Richaun Holmes wants to get paid. And can't blame him. He's been in the league for 6 years or so now, maybe 7. And finally rounded into shape. And he's been playing, it's not like he's not made some money, but at the same time, compared to guys making $30 to upwards of $40 million a year, and you're looking around saying, well, I think I can command minimum 8 to 10 out there, get something like a Montrezl Harrell contract, which is 9 and change per year. And I don't know how much you have to sacrifice to get him. The teams floated for homes right now are the Mavs, the Raptors in that mix, and the Hornets. They've all expressed interest. I think there's a chance that given the right package, they'll move on from him as well. Although, he's cheap, even if you got to re-sign him at that Montrezl Harrell type of level. That's good production for that value. But I don't know exactly what their plans are as of right now. The front office has publicly stated that, or sources say they stated that they're looking at, they're not looking at 2021. They're looking at 22, 23, 24, 25, like trying to really overhaul this roster and put it in contention year in, year out. And personally, I think the two best to do that around is, like I just said, De'Aaron Fox and Tyrese Halliburton. Those are your two real studs. Buddy Hield has had, some dissension in the ranks with management about getting paid, and they opted to hold on to him instead of Bogdanovich. And did they make the right decision? Perhaps, but I still think you find the right team, you can get enough for Buddy Hield. Maybe not right now, maybe in the offseason once the dust is settled, to find a better suitor. But the Kings are in a lot of people's potential, trades here and there. All right, moving on to another team that I'm not really sure what exactly their plans are as of right now, which is the Indiana Pacers. Because by all accounts, they're willing to have discussions about damn near everybody. I've even seen Sabonis being floated in potential discussions. Miles Turner, there's a ton of suitors for him. But they just got Caris LeVert back. And they really haven't seen what they have in the mix with Malcolm Brogdon, Caris LeVert, Sabonis, Miles Turner. Like, what they have there. I know Aaron Holiday can be gotten more than likely for relatively cheap, but they do have a question of TJ McConnell and Doug McDermott are coming up at the end of the year. McConnell is leading the league in steals. He has been excellent for them. And it's nice to have him in the backup role, but are you going to be able to afford all these different guys? Holiday, with getting LeVert back, and you got Brogdon. Brogdon, I've heard, is potentially a sacrificial lamb in this because of getting LeVert. Makes him somewhat redundant, but the 4-year, $80-some-odd million contract makes it a little more difficult to get him out the door. It looks as though if you wanted somebody on the Pacers and had a large enough offer, they're willing to do it. I mean, the Celtics have to be kicking themselves because they could have gotten Miles Turner so long as they were willing to figure out like some sort of Aaron Gordon sign trade type of situation in the offseason last year. And how much could the Celtics really use someone like Miles Turner right now? As much as I like Tice, and Tristan Thompson, like this platooning isn't a long-term solution for them, whereas Miles Turner better fits with their needs. And speaking of Tristan Thompson, there's talk of him potentially being traded. The Celtics will be active. They're looking to add 4 or 5 depth. It's a matter of what they have to give up to get him and who that player is. Obviously, Aaron Gordon is their number one target as of right now. But the Pacers are, in the mix more so than I thought. I figured Brogdon, now that they have Caris LeVert and they have redundancy at that position, and Holiday, no brainer. And I know that the Clippers have expressed interest in potentially picking up Holiday. The Clippers are also expressing interest in Lonzo and Ricky Rubio. I think of those three, the most likely are Rubio and Holiday, just because those are the cheapest assets. Lonzo, New Orleans is demanding a first, and I think rightly so. I think he is worth a first to get back in a trade package. Because New Orleans needs to figure out their identity going forward. And it's still the question to me of whose team is this? Is this Brandon Ingram's team or is this Zion's team? And they need to settle that discussion too. But Lonzo can be had. JJ Redick can definitely be had. I'm not entirely sure what you need to get him, but I think you can get JJ Redick. I mean, he's not getting much playing time as of right now. And on the right team, he is valuable. But think about him on the Lakers. What would the Lakers have to sacrifice to get some JJ to come off the bench? Because they need three-point shooting like nobody's business. As much as Dennis Schroeder had to come out in public and say, we need to shoot more threes. And Frank Vogel echoed that sentiment like a day or two later, saying, we need to shoot more threes. Right now, I want to say their percentage puts them in the ballpark of, I think, 24th or 25th in the league as far as three-point percentage. And then the volume of attempts is in that lower third, if memory serves as well. They need to get somebody in there. And the weird thing is they're in a somewhat of a bind because teams want Talen Horton-Tucker. If you're going to sacrifice, some asset of yours, they want to get a young guy in return. Talen Horton-Tucker is the most coveted of the young guys because his contract is cheap and he's producing at a good clip. Pelinka has apparently said that is off the table. The other name that I've heard floated from the Lakers, potentially, hypothetically, is Montrezl Harrell, which at 9.7-ish million, that's a good contract to have on your team. But as others have pointed out, when it comes to playoff time and say you have full health, well, AD is going to be playing a lot of those crunch time fives, or at the very least, they're going to have Gasol out there. Definitely to start, but potentially he might be out there closing games. You shorten your roster, then shift AD back over to the 4 type of situation, or have LeBron at 0.4, AD at 5. But because of that reduced roster, then a 4-5 coming off the bench, not as many minutes. Then you have to factor in they have trust in Morris, and Morris is going to be getting, playoff minutes as well. Because you run into the problem with Harrell. If you have him out there in those second units, then teams are rightly going to just do pick and roll and target Harrell because his defense is lacking. And they're just going to continue to run pick and roll and target Harrell. So it makes him kind of difficult to have out there. His scoring punch is nice, but is it enough to offset him just olaying dudes left and right? I don't know. So at his price point at 9.7, it's a movable contract. And you could get some three-point shooting back in return for that. They definitely need it. Their defense is still top 5. Actually, I believe they're still technically by 1 or 2/10 of a point. They're the number 1 defense in the league. And their point differential puts them in the top 10, somewhere around 7 or 8. So they're still hanging in there. But they shoot a boatload of 2s, and they don't shoot many 3s, and they definitely don't make a bunch of 3s. And if they want to compete for a championship again, they're going to need that scoring punch from 3. Plus, having the threat of three-point shooters out there just opens up the lanes, makes AD and LeBron all the more lethal. So Harrell might be the sacrificial lamb to get that player that they so desperately need. But it'll be super interesting. And for those joining late, if you want to chime in, put your email address over in the chat and I will send you a link and I'll bring you in and give me your quick, somewhere around 5-minute spiel of here's my team. This is what I'm hoping they pick up, and here's who I'm willing to trade out in order to do it. But if you don't want to and you just want to watch, there's a nice number of people watching right now, according to the live counter. Totally understandable. By and large, most people just watch each week as opposed to commenting, but I have zero problem with that. But anyway, put your email address over in the side and I'll shoot you the link. All right, moving on. So we've talked about Aaron Gordon, Kyle Lowry. We floated around. Another guy the teams are interested in, and I'll be intrigued actually to see if he moves, is Oladipo. Houston is more than willing to move on from Oladipo. He wants, the problem is, all right, so you're going to sacrifice assets for Oladipo, right? He's got the spotty injury history over the past 2 seasons. It's been a while since he was Oladipo. He's shown flashes since he's been in Houston, and he had a couple nice games in Indiana before they traded him. But it's known that his preferred 2 destinations in the offseason are Miami and New York. And for the first time ever, the Knicks are doing the wise thing in saying we're not sacrificing assets to make a trade for a guy that we can get for free in the offseason if he wants to come here. Wisely, don't make the same Melo mistake that you did before of we're needlessly going to send out so many assets so that by the time he gets here, we got nothing to build around. So much as Oladipo wants to go to Miami and New York, both teams have wisely said, well, we're not going to sacrifice assets for him if we can just get him in the offseason, especially Miami, because that is, by all accounts, Oladipo's numero uno destination. And if can't work in Miami, then he is happy to go to the Knicks. And if can't work at the Knicks, then I'm not entirely sure. But those are numbers 1 and 2. So Houston wants to move on from him. I think that they will. And, you know, you could probably, if it goes to like one of the destinations that is not on his preferred list and that team knows it, then it kind of hurts Houston in that team is just going to say, all right, well, we'll give you, instead of the firsts, more than likely plural that you're looking for, maybe we'll do a first and like a second or a boatload of seconds and a guy, like a young guy or something, where we're not going to sacrifice the farm for an individual that we don't think we can sign here long term. But Oladipo, I can't imagine by dinner time tomorrow night, he will be on Houston. Even if they can only get 1 second in matching salary, so long as that salary is not going to stay on their books beyond this season, I think they do it. They'll take anything they can get for him. That's my assumption on the outside looking in, just because he's not going to be part of their long-term plans unless he indicates I'm willing to sign here. But I would assume he still views himself as an all-star, all-NBA caliber player, even though it's been 2 years since he was that individual. So how much money is he going to demand in the offseason? What's the market going to be like for him? I'll be intrigued, but pretty sure Oladipo can be got. Ramon Cook over in the chat asks, any of the better guys of the Bulls gaining interest from any teams? Markkanen is out there. If you want Lauri, you can have him, according to Bulls front office, because if somebody came in with a Godfather offer, they could have him in the offseason, because I don't think the Bulls would match. Markkanen wants top tier money, and I am attached to him. I like Lauri a lot, but he's up and down. The consistency is what I question. Consistency, and can he stay out there for long enough? Between him and Wendell Carter, it's been tough to keep those two healthy. If he was healthy nonstop and he showed just slight improvement every year, I would be up in arms about potentially trading him. But if somebody's willing to come in and give a Godfather for him, yeah, I think it's time. It sucks because I like Markkanen a lot, but I like his potential, I think, more than what he's shown. And I don't think anybody is going to come in and offer enough for LaVine. That would be the other big name potentially. Thad Young is going to stay on the team. I think you could get a decent haul for him, but by all accounts, management likes what he does for a team. And as a Bulls fan, I really love Thad Young. He is the right mix of veteran presence, knows when we need a bucket and when we don't, kind of is somewhat a Swiss Army, does what we need in the moment type of thing. I mean, he's not a superstar, but he was never billed as a superstar. He's a really good teammate, and I enjoy having him on the team. So I'm kind of glad that the Bulls aren't willing to give up on him yet. You know, we're still in the play-in game mix. I think that's an important step for the younger roster. And hopefully, like, Markkanen blows the doors off and we're forced to give him a contract worthy of his talents. And he has turned, the corner and wants to stay with the team. He, by all appearances, seems happier now with Donovan as opposed to Boyland. Just because Boyland really hurt him last year, in my opinion. But anyway, Francisco Lopez brings up, another team that I was going to get to. He said DeRozan is available. I don't know if you've touched on that yet. I have not. We can get to it now. So DeRozan is flat out available, but the fact of the matter is, I think the Spurs are also happy to hold on to him. So you need to come in with a decent offer to get him, but he can't be gotten. LaMarcus Aldridge is potentially a buyout. But if you wanted Aldridge, you could definitely have him. But I think DeRozan, unless they get a good enough offer, they're not going to buy him out. He will ride out the season with them. That's my guess on the outside looking in. But I think, he's not part of the young core that they've got, nor their long-term future. And they're currently sitting in, I believe, 7th position. Although by point differential, and given how hard their second half of the season looks, it'd be impressive if they were still roughly in this position after another 20 games. But we'll see. You never know. I mean, Pop is a hell of a coach. That team buys in. Crazier things have happened in this league, so it's entirely possible. But DeRozan can't be gotten. It is possible. And I keep looking at Twitter to see if there's any kind of breaking, but I haven't seen anything. Johnny Shoemaker said, did you see the proposed Laker Hornets trade? I think it'd be crazy to get rid of KCP and Harold. Now, posted in the link, what's the proposed trade? I haven't seen anything with KCP. I've seen stuff with Harold, and that makes sense. I don't know if I get rid of KCP just because how much he meant to you guys last year. You know that he can deliver in big moments. But post a link, Johnny, and I can open it in this, while this is going on to illuminate everybody else. All right, moving on. So let's go to Lonzo next. So, like I said before, New Orleans is asking for a first. There's a whole bunch of teams. My Bulls were floated at one point, like a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, of like, maybe this is a Lonzo destination. Might even be a little bit before that. The Clippers definitely have interest. They just don't have anything really to give up, especially if New Orleans wants a first in return. It's going to be a while before the Clippers can give up a first. And then the the Stepien rule. I'm not sure that next available first, if they'd even be able to give it up. So we shall see there. Denver is also kind of kicked the tires on a Lonzo deal, which could entirely work. But Lonzo is potentially out there if anybody really wants him. Now, here's the whole bunch of the list from here on is these guys can be had. Whether or not anybody is willing to make any kind of trade for him is the real question. So Spencer Dinwiddie can be had. I saw a trade potentially of Avery Bradley for Spencer Dinwiddie, but Dinwiddie more than likely wants to start somewhere. And he's proved, the year that D'Angelo Russell made the All-Star team for the Nets, had Dinwiddie not been hurt, that spot was his. So he's proven that he is All-Star level. And so long as he comes back, somewhere near 100% healthy, he should be getting starter minutes there. And at one point, there was talk of Norman Powell for Spencer Dinwiddie. But now that, Norman Powell's really in the past month, his value has soared. I don't think that that's a trade that Toronto is really willing to do as of right now. Plus, Dinwiddie's not a younger guy. I mean, I'm assuming the future for Toronto is Van Vliet, Siakam, and potentially Anunoby. So you want to kind of figure out what you've got there and get guys roughly on the same kind of timeline, or potentially go younger and build through the draft. But Dinwiddie can be got. Kelly Oubre can be got. And according to Steve Kerr, teams have interest because Kelly Oubre is a playmaker and he's got a lot of ability and talent, and he's done well for them. Which I believe and I don't. If you've watched any Warrior games, it's a mixed bag from what you're going to get from Kelly night in, night out. Yes, the guy is a playmaker. His best attribute is his just athletic ability and his, prowess in making a play, but consistent shooting and creating a shot for himself, not necessarily. So he's got value, but on the right team. I saw that Atlanta had expressed potential interest, but I don't know what they're willing to give up. Plus, at his price point, I mean, I saw a trade floated of swapping Oubre with Bogdanovich and, filler around it. If I'm the Warriors, I do that. If I'm Atlanta, I'm not sure if I do. You already have players that kind of do some of the things that Oubre does. So I'm not entirely sure that I want to make that trade if I'm Atlanta, but Oubre can be got. Technically, Andre Drummond can be got, but all indications are he's going to be bought out, which is amazing because a guy of his caliber, you can't really find a suitor for unless Cleveland is just asking for too much. But he's got a high salary, so it's tough to make the salary match. So you're not sacrificing too much on the other end. But if he gets bought out, then his two most likely destinations then will be the Nets and the Lakers. And I'd assume, just on the outside looking in, that the Nets would be his number one destination. You're going to get a more secure role there. DJ may still technically start, but you could easily be playing the bulk of minutes because I'm not entirely sure what you're going to get out of Blake Griffin long-term on this. I mean, everybody made a big fuss about him dunking the other night. That's a whole lot of zippity doo-dah because eventually teams are just going to back off of him and be like, all right, that's fine. Do anything other than, pass the ball right now. I don't, foresee him blowing by a whole bunch of people night in, night out. So beat us with your jumper and then we'll respect that first. I want to see that those knees aren't shot, but Andre Drummond, technically you could get him, but the league is just assuming he's going to be bought out. So I don't know that anybody's going to make Cleveland an offer. And on that front, JaVale McGee can be had as well. And I think you can get JaVale for a second, just a single second, and you can get JaVale. And on the right teams, he can make a difference. JaVale has shown, which is crazy, if, coming into the league, his years on Washington, never in a million years did I expect JaVale McGee to have this long a career and be coveted by championship contenders, knowing that the guy can play high leverage moments. Also on that Drummond front, because McGee, if McGee goes somewhere for a second, like Portland has expressed interest, but don't make a run at Drummond. Why wouldn't they? I've heard them potentially putting Nurkic in various trades just because of his health concerns. But McGee for a second, Portland could do that. They'll make a run at Drummond. The Nets earlier in the year expressed interest in McGee. Now, if they have a shot at Drummond, they'll take Drummond. But if Drummond opts to go somewhere else, and the Nets need to make a decision right now. They can't sacrifice. They've got seconds. They could give up a second to get McGee, if that's all it's going to take. And that's what I read. I know his price tag was higher earlier in the season, but now Cleveland is just looking for draft assets. So a single second, you could get JaVale McGee, and certainly there are teams that could use him. As I mentioned before, Aaron Holiday, Ricky Rubio, and George Hill. George Hill can also be had. And I think if you came in to New Orleans, you could and said, hey, we want Eric Bledsoe. They'd be happy to get off Eric Bledsoe's contract. You could get Eric Bledsoe. But I mean, the teams really out there hunting are Philly, Brooklyn, Milwaukee for some depth. I don't think that they're looking for any kind of starter, but overall depth. Miami, if they can shore up their point guard position, just because the indications with Lowry. I don't think Phoenix and Utah are in any kind of situation where they want to make a move. Potentially. Oh, okay, so Casey, Johnny Shoemaker's just put the trade in the side over here. So it's KCP and Harrell for Rozier, Biyombo, and Monk. I don't know. I think both teams get worse with this. I think Lonzo goes to the Nuggets or the Clips, unfortunately. Well, the Nuggets have the draft asset. If Denver wants a first, they can do that. The Clippers don't have their first, I believe, until 2027. So it'd be tougher for the Clippers unless they could package other assets, get a first in return, and then turn around and get that out the door. But potentially. So that KCP and Harrell for Rozier, Biyombo, and Monk. Look, Rozier right now has the best, in crunch time, has the best shooting percentage. So in these clutch moments, Rozier's this season is proving to his worth. And, Biyombo is filler, but Monk has played really well this year too. That's super interesting. I don't hate that trade as much as you do, Johnny. I don't hate that trade. I need to think about it a little bit more, but if I'm the Lakers, that's not a bad haul for Harrell, who's more than likely not going to be getting a ton of minutes, and KCP. KCP's the bigger. David Nishimoto says he's a Boston fan and they're in desperate need of a dominant center. Yes, you are. Whether or not you're willing to do with it, what you have to give up to get him. I mean, it's like I said before, Andre Drummond gets bought out. They'd love to have Andre Drummond, but he gets his choice of destinations, and all indications right now are the Nets and the Lakers are 1 and 2 in some order. I believe Lakers are technically number 1. Although if I were him, I'd go to the Nets just because I think they have. I mean, look at it. They don't have Durant, and they're still a tough out. It's Houston 2.0 with Harden at the helm. And they only get to add him back. And now you join that squad. That's championship right there. Whereas with the Lakers, it's like LeBron, we assume is going to come back healthy, but AD has had health issues. He's been in and out of the lineup his entire career. Last year was almost an anomaly. AD comes down to, yes, he has all the talent in the world, but can he give you, 75 games and the playoffs, let alone 82? And this year, 72. So can he give you 62 games? And it's not going to happen. And that calf strain, how severe is it? He's been out for a while, and he's going to have to play himself back into shape type of thing. So the championship isn't a lock. And Johnny Shoemaker chimes back in. I'd love to have Drummond on the Lakers. Of course you would. Why wouldn't you? This party's over. Says, do you think Rob Pelinka has something up his sleeve? It's the Lakers, man. They're a draw to every team. Most players spend, like, and by most, I mean there's a large chunk of players that spend their off seasons in LA. So they already think of this on some level as kind of a second home. So you have that draw. You have the draw of playing with LeBron and AD. You have the draw of winning a championship with the Lakers. You have a draw. I mean, there's a lot working in Pelinka's favor right now. So I never view the Lakers as being out of the mix in any of this stuff. It just, they sacrificed a tremendous amount to get AD, rightly so. And they don't have much left in the coffers to go out and make any kind of huge moves at this point. Plus, they need to be thinking about 2 years from now when Father Time may have finally caught up. And I say may have just because it's crazy that LeBron was drafted 18 fucking years ago. 18 years ago. In his, 17th season. Sorry, I got a hair right on the bill of my hat. It's driving me nuts. And he's still quite possibly the best player in the league. But you do have to start thinking about life after LeBron. And do you want to sacrifice every asset you have right now to win another championship? Yes and no. Because AD is still a young enough guy that building around him seems like another avenue towards contention in 3 years. So he's in a bit of a quandary, but never count the Lakers out. They're still the Lakers. So Ramon Cook says, how trades work in the U.S. is so alien for me as a European. For him, it's just a bag of money from one team to another. Yeah, here you gotta match salaries, and then you gotta do sweeteners, at least in the NBA. But you can't just say, hey, I want to have him, and then the team that has him says, that's fine. You got to spend X to talk to him. And basically for that transfer fee or whatever it's called. That doesn't happen here. But that's also because it's one league as opposed to a confederacy of, how many ever leagues between EPL and Italian Series A and, Spain's league and Bundesliga and France's league. And so transfer fees make more sense there when you have all these top tier leagues competing for the pie. So D-Train. Oh, he's asking about Nets, about Kyrie in general. And Kyrie, and then when is Durant coming back? We'll save that for another day, D-Train. Today is trade discussion day. But I appreciate it. Thank you for joining us. All right. So I see I have nothing so far. Either Woj or Shams. Nobody has specifically stated everything. It is all quiet on the Western Front as of right now. And I think another reason too is because of the advent of the play-in game, and outside of in the East, top 3 teams, and in the West, I'd say top 5 teams. There's so many teams fighting for those, in the East, positions 4 through 10, that various GMs are kind of sitting back and waiting, going, what exactly do we intend on doing this year? So, it's a Ramon. Sorry, I looked over and read. No problem, man. Don't mind explaining. I don't know that I got into too much explanation there, but one league versus 17 is, I think, the biggest difference. They all have one collective bargaining agreement, so there are rules in place. So anyway, the GM's just sitting back, not entirely sure how this season is going to pan out. Do you want to put your chips in? Because there's also, you have to take into account, because of COVID, right? Sacramento that I brought up earlier being somewhere in the ballpark of $100 million in the hole. So there are other teams like that too, that are just severely in the hole. Like I am speculating and guessing, but say the Pacers, who usually are on the fringe of they're happy to get the extra money left over from the luxury tax of other teams because they're a smaller market team and they factor that into their overall operating budget for the year. So a team like that, or OKC, right? But in regards to the Pacers, they may not want to ship any of these guys out because by the time the playoffs roll around, fans could be back in the stadium, and having a playoff team means you could recoup some of those losses. On average, a team clears $1 million per home game in the playoffs. Clears. So that's $1 million of profit in a year that has been difficult for, a bunch of different teams financially. You have to take that into account. Yes, you need to think about the future, but for somebody like Indiana, it's like, man, we got bills to pay. And also, if we kept this core intact, we need to see what they are. And it's a young enough team that we could run this back next year. Although it might be the high water mark to trade out some of these individuals. So you're stuck in this quandary of do we make the playoff push, or do we just say, all right, we are putting our chips in for next year or 2 years from now. So that's why it's been relatively quiet. There haven't been too many trades thus far. I think people are holding off until the last minute. And if there's going to be any activity, it's going to be a flurry of stuff right near the deadline tomorrow. That's my guess. Not being in a front office, I have no idea, to be perfectly honest. I'm just trying to read the tea leaves here and get a lay of the land and figure out why it's been really quiet. Bunch of floated ideas, but doesn't really seem to be any serious traction as of right now. And I think it's just a lot of the financial implications, plus this play-in game. How much does potentially making the playoffs mean to your franchise and to your young core? Like somebody like Memphis, I think it means a lot. Almost having made it in last year, if they were to get into another play-in game and make it in this year, that is a step in the right direction, especially in the West when the competition is much more difficult. It looked as though the East had finally regulated, but no, it hadn't. Now that we've played enough games, it's the same thing it's been for 21 to 22 years now. The West is the much better conference. I mean, 500 teams in the East are right around the 4-5 seed, whereas 500 in the West gets you closer to 9-10. So the party's over. It says, will we have a trade deadline recap show tomorrow? Well, I hadn't thought about it, I think technically when the trade deadline officially transpires tomorrow, I will just be finishing up another recording. So quite possibly. Look, if I do that tomorrow, because nobody joined me today, and that's fine. The chat is going off, and I appreciate that. 15, 20 people tune in and just want to shoot the shit in the chat. That's awesome. But if I do that tomorrow, then you bastards need to join me, and I'll send out the link. So I want to hear from if your team made a move, whether or not you like that move. I hadn't thought about it, but this party's over. Let me know on Twitter. If enough of you tweet at me or leave comments on this saying that you want a recap show tomorrow and you're willing to join me, and I'm not just talking into the void by myself, although I do have you in the chat and I appreciate I will do it. So tweet at me at Matt Nost or leave a comment over at youtube.com/dropping dimes on this video, and I will look through them. And if there's enough of demand, then I would do it. If it's just you and me, this party's over, then perhaps we'll just do this discussion next week. But I'm going to go ahead and call it there because it's speculative. I still see nothing from Shams or Woj. So yeah, I got nothing else. But those seem to be the biggest names and the biggest teams in the mix as of right now. Mr. Shoemaker, I don't hate that trade. It's interesting. I know you have an attachment to KCP. I think Harrell is movable. And if you can get Rozier and Monk back. Actually, I mean, from the Hornets perspective, I don't think I do that, to be perfectly honest. That's where I think that trade imbalance is. Plus, I've heard that Jordan is really taking a fondness to Rozier. So I don't know that he trades him out just for KCP and Harrell. And Monk has finally turned a corner. I think that's, if I'm Charlotte, I say no to that before the Lakers say no to that. But anyway, that is today's show. Thank you to everybody that joined me over in the chat. I really appreciate it. Leave a comment, like I said before, or send me a tweet if you want to see that recap show. Otherwise, I'll be joining you guys again next Wednesday at noon, as per usual. That is it for today's Dropping Dimes. Thank you so much to everybody that joined me. Enjoy your trade deadline out there. Hopefully, if your team is in the mix, they make a move that you appreciate and think actually helps your championship odds. I think this year is somewhat wide open. The top two teams are the only two that you really need to worry about in each conference. And if those falter at all, then I think anybody would, I think a lot of teams could be in the mix. So it's not a fait accompli like it is other years. So we'll see. I already have people chiming in the chat that they will be there. Well, we got to get more than just a couple. We shall see. We shall see. Tweet at me at Matt Knost or leave a comment over at youtube.com/Dropping Dimes. And that is it for today's show. Thanks again to everybody. Stay safe out there. Wash those hands. Stay 6 feet apart. We're almost through this. We've almost made it to the other side. Let's make it there together. Until next week or possibly tomorrow. Adios.